This is the chapter where they talk about the land and those that are staying on the east side of the Jordan versus those that are continuing to go in. And of course, the Jordan River right down along here, along the Rift Valley, and they're electing to come over here and stay on this side of the river, while the rest of the tribes are going over into all of that on the western side of the Jordan. Of course, that's all still in contention these days. But let's read verses 1 through 5 of Numbers chapter 32. It says, "The sons of Reuben and Gad had very large herds and flocks, and they saw that the territory of Jazer and Gilead were ideal for livestock. So the sons of Reuben and Gad came to and said to Moses, Eleazar the Cohen, and the princes of the community, saying, Adaroth, Dibon, Jazer, Nimrah, Heshbon, Elealeh, Sebon, Nebo, and Baon, the territory Adonai conquered before the community of Israel, are suitable for livestock, and your servants have livestock. And then they said, If we have found favor in your eyes, let this territory be given to your servants as a possession. Don't make us cross the Jordan." You know, the Israelites had just defeated all of those nations, those kings and those peoples over here on this eastern side. They had defeated those peoples there back in chapter 31, and it was a relatively easy battle as far as they were concerned. When you look back in chapter 31, verse 49, it says, they said to him, "Your servants have counted the heads of the men of war under our command, and not one of them is missing." So in spite of all of these conflicts, these battles, this victory that they had, 12,000 men go out to war and not one was lost. That doesn't happen. That's not normal for anything. Even when in victory, there are always some losses. But even here, the Lord must have truly been with them to give them that kind and that great of a victory where not one of them was lost. But when they look at it, when they consider what's coming in their future, when they consider what's going on, when they're looking back at this map, and they're thinking about what happened on this eastern side, can they count on not losing a single person ever again? Can they count on that? Is that likely to happen? No, it's not likely going to be a recurring event. So from their perspective, it's probably not going to get much better. Hey, this land has been taken. This land, it was pretty easy to do it. It's been subdued. And we know from all the testimony, from all the things that have been said before, for all the reason why we're still here in the wilderness for these 40 years, they know that there are much greater obstacles on the other side of the river. They know there's a lot of things going ahead. There are those great fortified cities. There are those hardened people that make them feel like grasshoppers and such. I don't think they've forgotten the testimony of what was brought back. So in their minds, it's not going to really get much better than what they have already secured on the eastern side of the Jordan. And they thought, man, if it's going to be that easy to take this territory, to take this land, surely it's going to be not big of a deal, not much of a threat for us to keep it and maintain it and hold on to it. With what they have, what they've seen, they have these possessions, they have all of those flocks, they see this countryside, they're thinking in their minds, we've got a good thing going over here. Is it ever really going to be better over there than this? And so in a lot of ways, I think their desires are combining all of those observations, all the things that they have, they're combining to ask for a portion outside of what God has been seeking to provide for them. Don't make us cross the Jordan. In some ways, that says something about what they think's over there. We think we might have it better over here. Don't make us go. Once we cross this line in the sand, we know we're going to lose some of what we have, and it may not be getting any better than this. they did know it was going to get harder from then on, that what they have for certain looks better than what they might have. And you know, a lot of people play games and things like that that play on this idea. Do y'all recognize that? Can you see that at all? Can you recognize what that is? What show is that? Let's Make a Deal. Oh, okay, I forgot I had it up there. Let's Make a Deal. The whole premise of that game is you typically start off having something. They'll give you something right off the bat, usually. And then they'll say, okay, do you want to keep what you have, or do you want to lay it on the line and risk picking the wrong door? Because usually only one of these doors is going to have something. Well, one of them might have something okay, but it might be less than what you've got. One of them might be a lot more than what you've got, but one of them you might lose everything. Right? Isn't that typically how it works? They play on that decision that you have to make of, do you want to risk what you have for something that may or may not be better, something that might be better, or you want to risk losing everything? Of course, they bait you into it, don't they? Because why? They give you something, it's like, well, I know I can get something bigger than this. But so they bait you into making those kind of decisions. So for these tribes, for Reuben and Gad, you know, what's behind door number 2 may be worse that they have already won. They may feel like they're going to lose everything, because when they get over across the Jordan, right, how do they receive the land? How is that decided? Do they get to pick what they want? No. They don't get to pick what they want. It's decided by lot. It's assigned to them. So they don't necessarily get to pick what they want. They can't control that. They can't decide that for themselves. What if what I get is not as good for flocks and herds? What if I get some of the territory that might not be most suitable for that? Then I'll have to suffer, or my flocks, so I'll have to sell my flocks and change the way I live and take up a different kind of way of life. Then that's not going to be as easy. So in a lot of ways, this call for them to stay on the eastern side is, okay, we know what we've got. We know this is good. We can assert some control of the situation rather than trust in random assignments. We can assert some control and pick what we have and what we want. There's an element of safety in that. We can pick what we want and not wait on that random thing, because we don't know what we're going to get if we do that. And we know we've already taken this side, and it turned out it was pretty easy. So this demonstrates a few things for them. It demonstrates really a lack of trust. Does God know that they have flocks and herds? Do you think God would assign them a place that's suitable for flocks and herds on the other side? Yeah, He would. So what they're demonstrating is a lack of trust really in Him and His provision and what He is going to do. There's that element of fear that still lingers in them. Of, I don't know if I want to take that step because I don't know what's on the other side. I don't know what's there. Essentially, we talked about this last week. This was one of Moses' concerns. May the God of all, the spirits of all flesh appoint a man over the community to go out and come in before them, who will lead them out and bring them out, so that the people of Adonai will not be like sheep without a shepherd. What's happening in this situation here is that the sheep are essentially telling the shepherd, hey, we'd like to stay right here. We don't want to have to go. The sheep are trying to tell the shepherd where they're going to go and where they want to stay. And again, that's what Moses was concerned about. The sheep just kind of making their decisions all on their own without the guidance of the shepherd. When you look at Reuben and Gad and such, they were the ones that camped on together on the same side of the tabernacle. They were on the south side. And you think, why would Reuben want to be a part of this? Why would this tribe be a part of it? Well, you go back, a few centuries to when Jacob is giving, his blessings to his sons. You recall those blessings. I'm not necessarily going to go back there and look and read those things, but these weren't just blessings and saying and speaking about them, the individual sons. It was also making a statement about the future of their descendants and the tribes that come later. So it was that prophetic oracle about what was going on in the future. So Jacob, he was pronouncing the destinies of these tribes and each of his sons and what they would happen to them. He was pronouncing the characteristics that each of these tribes would develop, and those characteristics were extensions of what was already in those characters and those people in his sons already. So Reuben, in a lot of ways, was already somewhat put out of the position that he was born to. You know, he was already disowned in some ways. He was his firstborn, but he wasn't given the rights of the traditional rights of the firstborn because of what he had done, you know, with his father's concubine, going in and having relations with her. Jacob stated that Reuben was as unstable as water. That's how he kind of put it. And therefore would never really rise to the heights that he could have been. He was never excelled to that point. He had all the position, he had the physical attributes, he had the intelligence and the advantages to do well, but he seemed to lack that morality, that strength of character and such. So that characteristic of instability is what somewhat passed on. And that's realized within this tribe over the centuries. You know, it's what led the tribe of Reuben to choose really unwisely or out of fear or out of concern to stay out of the promised land in favor of living on the eastern side, a land that was not set aside for the people of God, not within the boundaries that was laid out. And over time, Reuben becomes less and less prominent, less and less in number, less and less significant in their history. In fact, some claim that by Saul's time, that Reuben was essentially absorbed into the tribe of Gad and almost disappeared. Now, there's some debate on that and exactly what goes on, but their significance had declined. Gad, you know, his blessing by Jacob was recorded as a play on words. It's all about his future as a fighting force, a military force, that they would have to fight off all these enemies all the days of their life due to their location. So Jacob's pronouncement is translated like Gad, a troop will raid him, but he or Gad will raid on their heel. In other words, Gad is going to be a tribe of fighters, and they're going to be willing to fight, but they're going to have to fight. Because in reality, is that eastern side of the Jordan, is that really all that protected? Is that really all that easy and all that safe? No, it's not. It's not really all that safe. They would be military oriented out of necessity because the enemies of the people would constantly be harassing and fighting for that territory. And a lot of times those other peoples would win out, and then they would have to try to retake it. This was a control thing for these two. They could control and decide what they were going to get. They were not intending to send a message of breaking up the family. Because remember, this was a people that after these 40 years was now one people. But all of a sudden you have these elements within them that says, you know, we really don't want to cross over. We really don't want to go in with the rest of you. Because that's the way Moses took it. When you look at verses 5 through 15, you know, they said, don't make us cross the Jordan. Moses replied to the sons of Gad and Reuben, should your countrymen go to war while you dwell here? Why do you dishearten Bnei Israel from going across to the land that Adonai has given to them? Your fathers did this when I sent them from Kadesh Barnea to look over the land. They went up to the valley of Eshcol and viewed the land, but they discouraged the hearts of Bnei Israel not to enter the land which Adonai had given to them. The anger of Adonai was aroused that day, and he swore on oath, saying, the men who came out of Egypt from 20 years old and upward will not see the land that I promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, for they have not followed after me with a whole heart, except for Caleb, son of Jephunneh, and the Kenizzite, and Joshua, the son of Nun, for they were wholehearted after Adonai. And the anger of Adonai burned against Israel, and he caused them to wander in the wilderness 40 years, until all the generation doing that evil in Adonai's sight was gone. Now look, here you stand in the place of your fathers, as a brood of sinful men, to add more to Adonai's great wrath against Israel. If you turn away from him, he will repeat again, leaving this people in the wilderness. You will being the cause of this people's destruction. So how does Moses take this request? Would you say he took it well or not so well? Not so well. I mean, he's looking at this and saying, guys, don't be stupid. All right, if you do this, you're going to be making the same mistake that they did 40 years ago, and you're going to bring back all this judgment that we've all had to endure all over again, and we're probably not going to survive it this time if we're stupid enough to make the same mistake twice. So, he was taking it. When you look at that, should your countrymen go to war while you dwell here? He was thinking that they were wanting to back out of the fight. He was thinking that they were unwilling to go and fight with their brothers. He's thinking maybe they were afraid to go over and fight with their brothers. He basically, they were backing out. He also thought that the request would hurt morale of all the other tribes, just like those reports of the 10 spies 40 years earlier. He says, why do you dishearten Bnei Israel from going across? Have you learned nothing over the past 40 years? Are you going to repeat that same mistake? So Adonai was angry, and they were punished by not being able to go into the land, to die out in the wilderness, before they were receiving the inheritance of promise. And these guys are standing there saying, hey, we don't want to receive the inheritance of promise either. That's how Moses is certainly taking it. Always being close, but never quite receiving that. They're choosing. He's accusing them of wanting to choose door number 3 or whatever else, and getting the prize or the thing that basically means they lose it all. That's what he is afraid of. That's what Moses is feeling. He's calling them a brood of sinful men. What he thinks their motive is that they are sinning against God by asking this question, risking the anger of God, potentially destroying them all. So the sons of Jacob, when you think about that background, they went in to Egypt. They went into the land, a small family, but they came out a nation. And they spent 40 years being made one people, and he was accusing them of breaking up the family and ending this great people. And when confronted with these things, the tribe responded appropriately. But they still didn't give up on their request. Look at verse 16 through 19. It says, Then they came up to him and said, We will build sheepfolds for our livestock and cities for our children, but we are prepared to arm ourselves and go ahead of Bnei Israel until we have brought them to their place. Our children will live in the cities fortified against the inhabitants of the land. So they knew there were some still there, but they thought that they would be able to defend it. Yet we will not inherit with them on the side beyond the Jordan, since our inheritance has come on the east side of the Jordan. They're wanting to claim something else. They say that they are prepared to go with you. They're prepared to go with their fellow Israelites. They're not afraid of fighting, but they just want to stay. They didn't want to break up the band, so to speak. They just wanted to do a solo project for a little while and come back and be a part of it when they wanted to. Say, if we can take our families and our livestock, that's what they have, some of the things that they know. If we can take our families and our livestock, then they may not be lost. Because remember, they know it's going to be harder on the other side. And so they want to build a shelter. They want to build a protection for them, the sheep pens, the fortified cities. And when we get that done, when we get what we have is safe and taken care of, then we'll be sure and go with you. Again, they're not necessarily afraid of the fight, but protecting and not losing what they think is going to be better. What they know for certain they have for an uncertain future. They don't want their wives, their children to have to see the hardship of war and the danger of capture. Of course, the ironic thing about that is the very thing that they wanted to avoid really is what they experienced a lot of over there on the eastern side. You know, when you look at this, what's missing in this exchange? What's missing in this negotiation? When you look at verse 20. So here they've come back and said, no, we'll cross over with you. We're going to take our stuff, we're going to build them up, protect them, we're going to leave them there, then we're going to go with you. Verse 20 says, Moses said to them, well, if you will do this, again, they're making essentially a promise. They're giving their word, they're giving a vow or an oath, right? Which we've read in this passage means if they give that, then they have to fulfill it. If you will do this, if you will arm yourselves for battle for Adonai, and if all of you cross the Jordan until Adonai has driven his enemies from before him, and the land is subdued before Adonai, then afterward you may return and be free before Adonai and Israel. Then this territory will be your possession before Adonai. But if you don't do this, behold, you sin against Adonai. Be assured, your sin will find you out. Build for yourselves cities for your children and pens for your flocks, then do what has come out of your mouth. You gave a vow, fulfill it. The sons of Gad and Reuben said to Moses, saying, your servants will do just as my Lord is commanding. Our children, our wives, our flocks, and all of our herds will remain here in the cities of Gilead. But your servants, every one armed for battle, will cross over for the war before Adonai, just as my Lord says. So they're willing to go, and they're willing to be even in the front, leading, the tip of the spear kind of a thing. But what's missing in this exchange, in this negotiation? Does Moses ever go and ask the Lord what they should do? No. That's not a part of this conversation. Moses gives his answer without really seeming to go and ask. And I find that strange because he seems to do that almost everywhere else. When something comes up, he falls on his face before the Lord, or he goes to the tent of meeting and he inquires of the Lord, what should we do? And he doesn't do that this time. If Moses had gone and asked, what do you think his response would have been? Do you think that the Lord would have been okay with this? Do you think he would have said, sure, you guys go ahead and stay on this side. No big deal. Or do you think he would have said, no. Don't settle on the eastern side because that's not the inheritance I promised you. That's not what I have prepared for you. Don't forsake the inheritance that is the blessing that is yours. Don't separate from your brothers. It will dishearten your brothers. It will create a perception of separation. It will make them think that you're not with them or not connected to them. It will make them question whether you're committed to the same cause. It will make them begin to wonder whether you worship the same God. Right? All of those things are in there, and so if he had actually gone to ask, I believe the Lord would have told them no. Don't miss out on your blessing. Don't miss out on your inheritance. Because that's a significant thing, and it's really, in a lot of ways, see, that messed up. I thought I had that set. It's a modern problem that we kind of have today, and it's a problem of our own making. In a lot of ways, we are very similar to the tribes of Gad and Reuben, what ends up being the half-tribe of Manasseh. When you look at some of the Jewish commentary and things on this, they equate those tribes on the eastern side in a lot of ways with the actions of the Gentiles and how the Gentiles behave. They make a connection there between those tribes and the Gentiles because traditional theology has made us appear to the Jewish people a lot like them. A lot like Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. Like we should be connected with them, but we're kind of not. We should be a lot closer to them, but we're not. When you look at, this will all pop up here at the same time. You look at replacement theology. That essentially is like trying to claim all the inheritance is ours, all of the land, all the promises are our own, and essentially tries to kick them out of the inheritance entirely. It's not for you, it's for us. That's been a dominant perspective in church history for a couple thousand years now, and it's still very prominent today. We're acting like we have a different inheritance, or the inheritance that we have is not for them. When you look at things like that the pre-trib rapture position that we see, we've talked with Fred London about this a good bit. He's pointed this out, makes a very good point in it, that it gives the impression that we don't want to join the fight. When everything starts happening, when all of the tribulation starts building up in that when all this persecution and the attacks of the enemy against the Jewish people, against Israel, and all of that starts to happen in the tribulation, that our goal is to be gone. Our goal is we don't want to be here for that. We want to miss out on that and leave them essentially to fend for themselves. That's kind of the message that it's sending. What's going to happen, all this bad stuff is for you and not for them. When the going gets tough, the tough Gentiles get going out, and we're gone. We get to enjoy a party while the Jewish people are being targeted for greater and greater hostility. Right? Inadvertently, that's a message that we're sending, that we don't want to cross the Jordan into that kind of hardship and that kind of difficulty. We think that we are exempt from persecution and suffering, and inadvertently we're implying that they deserve it. That's what's essentially being said. And that's a challenging thing for us. That's a challenging thing for us to get over, because that's a dominant position. Even for a lot of those that love Israel, it's a dominant position. We don't really realize the full extent of what we are saying when we say and teach certain things and the implications of those. In a lot of ways, we act as if we worship a different God, with a different Torah, with a different set of commandments. Thank you. Because how long have we said this statement here? Jesus kept the Torah. Jesus kept the law. So that means we are exempt from that. We don't have to do any of that stuff. That's not for us. How long have we been saying that in Christian theology? Most of it. We've been saying things like that. Jesus kept the law and the Torah, so you don't have to. Now you essentially are free to live however you want under this umbrella of grace, that you'll always be forgiven for that. So it doesn't really matter how you live or how you sin, that just do what you want. But when we do that, we turn ourselves, we turn even Yeshua, the Jewish Messiah, into a practical, daily living Gentile. He's not really Jewish anymore when he doesn't keep the Torah. Because obedience to his commands, obedience to his Torah, is what Yeshua himself said, is that's how you show you love me. If you love me, you will obey my commands with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your strength. That's how all of that is demonstrated, by obedience to his commands, to the way of life that he has called us to, the halakha that he is there for us. That this is the way for us to walk. Now you need to walk in it. And if you truly love him, you will walk as Yeshua walked. And so much of it is put in that same kind of language. So then you say the actions of the tribes on the eastern side. When you get over to Joshua chapter 22, after they have dealt with the land, after they have been given rest, if you want to turn over there and look at that. This is the fulfillment of this oath that they have given. It says, so at the end of chapter 21, it says in verse 43, It says, so Adonai gave to Israel the entire land that he had sworn to give to their fathers. They took possession and settled in it. Then Adonai gave them rest on all sides, just as he had sworn to their fathers. Not one man of all their enemies withstood them, for Adonai gave all of their enemies into their hand. Not one good thing that Adonai had promised to the house of Israel failed. All came to pass. Okay, so they have been given that rest. Then Joshua summoned the Reubenites, Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, and said to them, you have kept all that Moses, the servant of Adonai, commanded you, and have listened to my voice in all that I commanded you. You have not abandoned your kinsmen many days to this day, but have kept the charge of the commandment of Adonai your God. So now Adonai your God has given rest to your kinsmen, as he said to them. So now turn and go to your tents, to the land that is your possession, which Moses, the servant of Adonai, gave you beyond the Jordan. But notice what he says that they have to continue in verse 5. He says, only be very careful to observe the mitzvah and the Torah which Moses, the servant of Adonai, commanded you, to love Adonai your God and walk in all his ways, and to keep his mitzvot. Cling to him and worship him with all your heart and with all your soul. Even though you're going to be on the other side of the Jordan, you'd still better be living in the same manner, in the same way, with the same God as what you've been serving all along. When we turn into some of the next few verses, in verse 10, it says that when they came to the region near the Jordan in the land of Canaan, the children of Reuben, the children of Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh built there an altar by the Jordan, a large and conspicuous altar. All right? What are they doing that for? There's confusion. Verse 11, then Bnei Israel heard about it and said, behold, the children of Reuben, the children of Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh have built an altar opposite the land of Canaan in the region of the Jordan across from Bnei Israel. When Bnei Israel heard of it, the whole congregation of Bnei Israel assembled at Shiloh to go up against them in war. There is a huge misinterpretation about what their intent was in doing this. All right? And in a lot of ways, we do some of the same things. You know, they have built their own altar. They were doing it to remember those connections, but they were interpreted as if they were going to start worshiping a foreign god, because if they built another altar, then that means that they're not going to be coming to the tabernacle. They weren't going to be participating in the offerings and the sacrifices, especially at what time of year? During what events? The feasts. If they've got a competing altar, then they don't have to come over here and join and be with us. And so when we invent, when we, the church, invented new holidays, purposely removing and taking away any Jewish reminders, it's as if we don't want to cross the Jordan either. We don't want to come to the tabernacle with them. And if we do try to come to the altar, we're going to come even on a different day of the week. Show up on this at the same time that they do. When they want to rest and worship, we see that as a day, on the Sabbath. Our heritage has us working or playing or doing something else. We can't even agree on when to worship, much less how. It's as if we have built our own altar. And they think that you're no longer with us. You're no longer a part of us. To their eyes, we are worshiping a foreign god. And we have made Yeshua into somebody who is all okay with that. We have made Yeshua into somebody that they don't recognize because we have removed so many of the Jewish elements of his life and existence and his teaching. We are essentially, it's as if we have asked in our traditional mainstream theology, we've asked to stay on the eastern side of the Jordan and not join the people in the inheritance. Is it any wonder that there is hostility between us and conflict between us? Is it any wonder? And have we proven out over the centuries that there is hostility between us? Has Christianity demonstrated some horrible things toward them to prove that we are not them and they are not us? Yeah. We are very guilty. of that. So hear these statements from Moses again, going back into chapter 32, and consider how he might be talking to us in our day, to the people of God, to the church, to the believing community in our day. What might he be saying? Moses replied to the sons of Gad and Reuben, and insert in here that he is speaking to believers, to Christians and things today. Should your countrymen go to war while you dwell here? Why do you dishearten Bnei Israel from going across to the land that Adonai has given to them? And what were we talking about? The rapture kind of concept, the pre-trib rapture. Why are you taking off? Why are you leaving when there's still fighting that has to be done, when there's still things that are going on? What does it do to their heart when they see that we're not as with them as we should be? Verse 14, now look here, you stand in the place of your fathers as a brood of sinful men to add more to Adonai's great wrath against Israel. If you turn away from him, from his provision, from what he has done for us, he will repeat again, leaving this people in the wilderness, you being the cause of this people's destruction. Why do they not want to join with us? Why do they maybe not want us to join with them? Because they're maybe afraid of all of this happening all over again. That's the situation that we're in. See, we don't realize the hurt, the division, the pain and confusion that our actions and beliefs over the years has caused to the Jewish people. But what we need to realize is what we're seeing in the move and the work of God. In our day, more and more people are being asked again to cross the Jordan. That's where we're at. We're being asked again to cross the Jordan. 32:17, this was the heart. It says, we are prepared to arm ourselves and go ahead of Bnei Israel until we have brought them to their place. And so this is one of the dividing things in the church. This is one of the dividing things in the days ahead that is going to be the cause of the falling away of many, as Yeshua talked about, is how are you going to answer that invitation of that willingness to cross the Jordan? Are you going to be willing to arm yourselves and go ahead of Bnei Israel until they have been come to their place? Are we prepared to arm ourselves and go forth with Bnei Israel? Are we prepared to say, we will not return to our homes? We don't want to just disappear, to be raptured away until each one of Bnei Israel receives their rest and their inheritance. Are we willing to say, we'll be here with you for that? Because in reality, their rest and their inheritance, is it just a place? Is their rest and their inheritance, isn't it more than just a place? Isn't it more than just safety from their enemies? No, their rest is a person. Their rest is Messiah. When you get over to Hebrews, he says, for we also have had the good news proclaimed to us, just as they did, but the word they heard did not help them, because they were not united with those who listened in faith. For we who have trusted are entering into that rest. What are we trusting in? We're trusting in Messiah. We're trusting in what he has done for us. And so he says, Hebrews 4:9, he says, so there remains a Sabbath, a Shabbat rest for the people of God. For the ones who has entered God's rest, who have crossed over into the Jordan, who have crossed over into that promise and that inheritance, has also ceased from his own work, just as God did from his. Let us therefore make every effort to enter that rest, so that no one may fall through the same pattern of disobedience. We don't want to be making the same mistakes again and again and again. The reason we can enter into the rest, the reason why we can experience that, is because of the faith and trust in Messiah. And there is coming a day when Messiah is going to return. And are they going to see him for who he is? Yeah. Are they going to, is it going to be a great and happy moment? Yes and no. You know, you hear people joke about it in the sense of when Messiah comes, we're going to ask him, is this your first or second time? Right? I don't think it's going to be that casual of a conversation. There is going to be a recognition. There is going to be even a mourning of how did we miss this? And we have to also realize some of our own issues is that some of the reasons that they have missed it over the years and over the centuries is because we have not presented him as somebody they would recognize.
Say that again.
That we have not presented Yeshua, the Messiah, as someone that the Jewish people would recognize because of some of our theology that says, you know, the Torah is irrelevant because all of these things, cutting ourselves off away from anything that reminds us of the Jewish background and heritage and all that stuff, they don't recognize him. To him, he's a Gentile. He's a completely another God as far as they are concerned. And so, while we look at them and say they're going to mourn for looking upon the one that was pierced, they're going to mourn because they recognize him as one who is coming. We're going to have some mourning in that sense as well. For my goodness, why haven't we shown them for who he really is? Why have we stayed on the eastern side of the Jordan all this time when we should be uniting together with them? Does that make sense?
No pine with die.
Right. And so I think I'm more convinced that we will be here with them during those difficult and troublesome days. That we're supposed to be. And of course that's going to cause a lot of, in the traditional church, to be radically confused about, boy, I thought my chart says, right? My chart says we're supposed to be leaving, like right here. What's going on? Well, that guy can't be the Antichrist because we're still here, right? So it's okay if I get behind his bandwagon because that's clearly not the Antichrist yet. That's going to be some of the ways in which the world is deceived, and why many in the church even fall away, because they're going to not realize and not recognize people for who they are because we've lost these connections.